Well, my name is Josh Batchelor, and I work with Linnemann Funeral Homes. I've been with Linnemann Funeral Homes since 2014. I worked for them for 2 years prior to that. Left for a couple years, and then I came back in 2014. So I've been back 9 years this year. And today I want to talk to you guys about funerals and the importance of funeral planning. So I don't know if everyone in this room has been involved with planning someone's funeral, but there's a little more to it than most people expect. I do have a copy of the slides that I'm going over on all the tables. You guys are welcome to take it with you. And if anyone has questions afterwards, you'll be able to ask some questions. So why is having a funeral important? Funerals can be meaningful. It's an expression of someone's life. It's a good way for friends and community to show support to people that have lost someone. There's a remembrance aspect and the reality. So funerals are really important. It's a good way for people in the community to come pay their respects to you. We meet with a lot of families at the office that are like, oh, mom didn't want anything. Well, it's not always about mom. It's about the people that are still living. You'd be amazed at all the people that do want to come and pay their respects to you, and they feel cheated when they don't have that opportunity. So someone you love passes away, there's a lot of people that want to come and show support to you. So funerals are very important. And funerals can be done a bunch of different ways. So when it comes to funeral options, the main two that everyone's familiar with is a traditional burial. That's where we have a complete service with a casket, a viewing, some kind of religious ceremony or service, or you could do a cremation. When it comes to cremation, there are 3 different types of cremation. So the first one is the most basic. It's just called a basic or a direct cremation. That's where we take your loved one, we cremate them. We return the ashes to you guys in an urn or a box. The next level of cremation is something called a memorial service cremation. So if you're ever reading an obituary and you see a memorial visitation will be held for Tim on Tuesday at 4 o'clock, memorial means the physical body will not be there. It means that person's been cremated. So with a memorial cremation, we actually cremate your loved one. We put them in a nice urn. And then we have a traditional style funeral, except without the body present, we have an urn present. And then the highest level of cremation is something called a full service cremation. So we can actually do a traditional style visitation service in a casket. Following all your services, then we cremate the body, then we take you to the cemetery. A couple other options you have would be a direct burial or a graveside. That's where we pick you up from the place of death. We meet with the family. We put you in a casket. We take you to the cemetery. And then the last one, which you can't see on this TV, is body donation. So there is some local body donation programs. Life Center and body donation are 2 different things. So if you're an organ donor or something like that, they will check with your family even if you have it on your license. But there's another program called the Body Donation Program. The one we use locally is the University of Cincinnati Body Donation Program. You have to be pre-registered. If you want to donate your body to science, you cannot do that after the death has occurred. Okay? If you donate your body to science, you still will need a funeral home to transport you. We'll pick you up, we'll transport you over. You'll go to Cincinnati College of Mortuary Science first. They will do an embalming technique on you. After they're done, they'll transfer you to UC. You can stay in that program up to 2 years. They could do all kinds of different teaching things with your body. We used them in gross anatomy when I went to the Cincinnati College of Mortuary Science. But you could stay in that program up to 2 years. Most people get out before that. They cremate your body. They return your ashes back to your family. If you want to be in the body donation program, you have to pre-register. We can't register you after you've passed. What to know about burials. So when it comes to purchasing plots or property at the cemetery, there's really 3 types of things you could purchase. Ground plot. Ground plot's what, you put you in the ground. Most of the cemeteries here in the Midwest do require a concrete liner known as a vault. A vault protects the casket between the weight of the earth. So when they used to dig graves by hand, it wasn't really an issue. But now that they use heavy machinery, between the weight of the machinery and the earth on top of your casket, they found out they were crushing caskets beneath the earth. So if you go to an old section of the cemetery, it runs like this. The new sections, they require these concrete boxes. It protects the casket from being crushed from the weight. Pretty much every cemetery in the Midwest is going to require that. There are a few locally that'll let you get around it, but that's usually like an indigent situation where we don't have a lot of money to work with. Mausoleum is another purchase. Mausoleum's that pretty marble front wall that you see at the cemetery with your name and date of death, or date of birth and date of death engraved on it. If you go in a mausoleum, you have to be embalmed. We can't put unembalmed bodies in there. It would get pretty stinky at the cemetery pretty quickly. Mausoleums are a little more expensive than ground burial, but once you take the vault and the opening and closing of the ground burial, they're almost the same. So I get a lot of people go, oh, it's probably cheaper to bury me in the ground. Well, when you go to the cemetery and you purchase the plot, it is cheaper than a mausoleum. But once you put a casket and a vault in it, and then you pay the opening and closing, they're about the same cost. You can also, nowadays, a lot of the cemeteries are building urn niches, so they're like mausoleums for urns. You could bury urns in the ground. You could scatter ashes. There's all kinds of different ways of disposing of ashes. What to know about cremation. Cremation is a viable choice when looking for an alternative to burial. Many people view cremation as a cost-effective option. Cremation is going to be a lot more affordable than a casketed burial. With a casketed burial, you are buying a casket, you are buying a vault, cemetery properties involved. I always tell families, depending on what type of services you have, cremation can be about half the cost of a traditional burial. Like it says, cremation can occur after a traditional service, so you can be laid out in a casket and all your friends and family can come say their goodbyes, and you can be cremated afterwards.
So do you rent a casket if that's what you do?
We do. So we have a rental unit. Everything inside, there's a casket insert we put inside. So everything inside's brand new every time we use it. The outside shell, we get about 30 uses out of them before they get too beat up, before we have to swap out with a new one. But yeah, you don't actually purchase a casket if you do a full service cremation. It is a rental unit. Everything inside the casket is brand new, but the actual shell gets used multiple times. This is a big one with cremation, freedom of time constraints. So when someone passes away, if you want to do an open casket viewing, you have about 10 to 14 days where that body's still in pretty good shape. So embalming process, it doesn't completely get rid of decomposition, it slows the decomposition process down. So if you want to do an open casket viewing for a loved one, you got about 10 to 14 days. Nowadays, in the fast-paced society we live in, people's loved ones, their kids are going to college, taking jobs out of state. Sometimes someone passes, it's an inconvenient time. Oh, we got a graduation Saturday, and so-and-so's getting married. So sometimes families will wait 30, 60 days before they have services. Cremation's a good option for that, because once they're cremated, we don't have to worry about that body going bad on us anymore. Families have the freedom of keeping cremated remains. There's no law that states you have to bury someone's remains. If you're Catholic, the church will want you to put them in the ground in their entirety at some point. But there's no laws. You could take mom home, put her on the shelf, put her on the mantle in a nice vase or whatever you might like to do. So when it comes to cremation, when someone passes away, in the state of Kentucky, it is a majority state. So if you outlive your spouse and you have 5 children, 3 kids have to sign off for you to be cremated. You'd be surprised all the conflicts we run into at the funeral home, especially when a death is unexpected. These are conversations no one wants to have with their family, but you need to have these conversations. If something happens to you, what do you want done? Where do you want it to take place at? Those are some questions that you should have to sit down and have a conversation with your kids. I meet a lot of families, they come in, oh, did you ever talk to Dad about this? No, I didn't talk to him about this. But does he have any money set aside for it? I mean, literally, they have no idea what they're getting into. In the first 24 hours after a death occurs, there's about 84 decisions that have to be made. You can make all those decisions before the death occurs, and it'd be a lot easier on your whole family. Whether you use Linnemann, we have a lot of great funeral homes in northern Kentucky here. Chambers and Grubbs, the Middendorf family. There's quite a few funeral homes, so don't feel obligated. I've been with Linnemann, they've been very good to me. I feel like we do a good job for the community, but we do have some other good funeral homes in the area. So at some point in your life, sit down, have the conversation with your family. They need to know what assets you have. You wouldn't believe how many families don't know that they have life insurance or, maybe some kind of policy for this death. This talks a little bit more about the body donation program. We kind of went through that. In the booklet you got, there's a number in there if you are interested. It's a great program. It does help a lot of kids in college learn. It's a good way for them to learn. So I know we appreciated it when I was at CCMS back in 2009. Funeral homes are open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Depending on where a death occurs, the hospital, nursing home, hospice unit, family member, or coroner will contact the funeral home. So how it typically works is someone passes away. I would say about 85% of the time there is a medical professional there, either a hospice nurse, you may be in the hospital, you may be in a nursing home. When the death occurs, the first thing they're going to ask you is, have you guys selected a funeral home? If you have, they'll reach out to us. We try to get to the place of death within an hour of the death occurring. So as soon as we get that call, I don't care if it's 4 in the morning, I get up, I put a suit on like Superman, I jump in my van, I go get all my equipment at work, and I come to the place of death. So we do run 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. But the first thing that will happen is you'll get the initial call, we'll pick your loved one up, we'll bring them into our care. Depending on the time of day or night, we may talk about scheduling an appointment to come in and meet with us. We may let you just go back to sleep depending on what's going on. But it's a pretty quick process once that happens. Here's some information that you'll need to bring to the arrangements conference. We will need to know the Social Security number. We do notify Social Security if someone's passing. We'll need to know the date of birth and where they were born, their parents' names, including their mother's maiden name, the highest level of education they had completed, their occupation, maybe some cemetery information. Some people do buy cemetery property in advance, and they already have that information. They can give it to us. Veterans information, a picture for the obituary, and then life insurance information. Pretty much every funeral home in the United States will take life insurance as a form of payment. What you do is you assign a portion of that policy to the funeral home to cover the cost that we show on a goods and statements, or a goods and merchandise statement. So if you use life insurance, most funeral homes are going to charge you an extra 5%, because life insurance on average takes 8 to 10 weeks to reimburse. So we do sit there a while waiting to get our money, so we charge a little extra. You can pay with cash, check, all major credit cards, or life insurance. Life insurance is always a good option. It doesn't cost the family any money out of pocket. Understanding the death certificate process. Death certificate information is gathered by the funeral home during the arrangements. After we get it, we enter it into something called Kentucky EDRS, and that's the electronic death registration system in Kentucky. That's new. That just started back in about 2016. They did make all Kentucky death certificates electronic. Death certificates in the state of Kentucky are public record, so you can apply for a death certificate through Vital Statistics website at any time. Currently, they're $6 in the state of Kentucky. If you ever needed a death certificate for someone that passed, you can call the funeral home that you used, or you could go through Vital Statistics website. Autopsies results may take additional time. So the only time an autopsy takes place is if someone dies unexpectedly at home or at work. If you pass away at a nursing home or a hospital, they're not going to do an autopsy on you. They're going to have some information already, probably knowing what caused your death. Now, if you go to sleep one night, you're a totally healthy guy, and you just don't wake up, they're probably going to do an autopsy on you so they can let your family know what caused that death. Death certificates on average take 4 to 6 weeks to be completed. We do our best to try to expedite that, but sometimes it does take a little longer. Once approved, certificates get mailed to the funeral home, and then we'll call you. We could run them to the house. You guys could stop in and pick them up. Death certificate costs vary depending on state. You file a death certificate in the state that the death occurred. So if you go on a trip to Florida and same thing, you have a heart attack at dinner or something, you will have a Florida death certificate. You only file for a death certificate in the state that the death occurred. So in Hamilton County, a death certificate is $28 a copy. Every county in Ohio is a different cost. In Kentucky, statewide, the first copy is $8. Any additional copies are $6. Indiana does a short and a long version. The short's $12, the long's $22. New York State, I think they're $51 a copy. So depending on what state you pass in, will depend on where your death certificate comes from. Should I pre-plan my funeral? I would recommend you definitely should. While planning a funeral is not the easiest experience to consider or discuss, it can provide both peace of mind for you and your family. The 3 major reasons to pre-arrange a funeral: number 1 is to choose the specifics of your own service, allowing it to be exactly as you hope it to be. Number 2 is to alleviate the stress from loved ones, as they do not have to worry about planning your funeral. And number 3 would be to prepay your funeral cost which relieves the financial burden at the time of need. So legally, a funeral home cannot take money from you for services they have not rendered. So if you go to a funeral home and they sit down and they talk to you and they go, yeah, just cut a check to me, we'll put it in the bank, leave that funeral home. If you come to Linnemann, what we're going to do is we're going to recommend you put your money into a trust. PNC Bank has an account called the Funeral Funding Trust of Kentucky. It's the largest account in PNC Bank. It grows about 3% annually, which is pretty much our inflation rate in our industry. But what happens is you come in, you could prepay. We open up a funeral funding trust account. You own that account up until the time of your passing. At the time of your passing, even if you met with me at Linnemann, say you pass in Tennessee, you go to a funeral home in Tennessee, whatever funeral home provides the death certificate with their name on it can claim that money out of your trust account. Okay? So if you come to Burlington and pre-plan with me, you guys buy a house in Florida, move to Florida, all your family needs to do is call me, hey, Dad passed, we decided we're going to keep him down here in Florida. I'll fax and email all the paperwork I have on your loved one down to that funeral home. I'll send them the form to cash that money in. That is your money. So if you come across hard times, you need to withdraw that money. You can take that money back. It's a consumer protection. So like in the 60s and 70s, you could just go to a funeral home. You'd meet with maybe Bud Linnemann. He'd go, oh, it's $8,000. You write him a check. He put it in the bank. Well, the problem was Bud would sell that to someone else. Then family comes in, Dad died, he met with Bud 10 years ago, it's all taken care of. Well, Bud don't work here anymore. So there's a lot of families that are running into some issues. So the Federal Trade Commission mandated that a funeral home cannot take money for services they have not rendered. Okay? The average funeral cost in the United States right now for a traditional burial is going to be about $15,000 if you have not purchased cemetery property yet. If you already own cemetery property, you're probably going to be in the $10,000 to $12,000 range. Okay? That's a big chunk of money when you're not expecting it. Cremation, average cost of cremation. Cremation in those services is going to run you about $1,800, and it could go anywhere from about $1,800 to about $8,500 if you went with maybe a traditional style cremation where you had the casket layout and all those things. So funeral costs are going to be anywhere from $1,800 to probably $15,000, $16,000, depending on some of the selections you make. So a lot of families come in and they meet with me and they go, oh, Mom just said put me in a pine box, and if they didn't see me when I was alive, they don't need to see me when I'm dead. That's a lot of the common things people say, but I don't think they always mean that. But then their family comes in and they're like, well, we never really talked about it. All she ever said was, put me in a Folgers can, And it's like, well, is that what you want to do with your mother? And they don't know. They're kind of lost. So I always tell families, you can meet with us and do a pre-arrangement, and you don't have to put any money down. You could just come in and talk to one of my directors or myself. We'll explain to you what all the different options are, kind of what you'd be looking at price-wise. It doesn't cost you anything to do that. You can take that information home. You can talk to your families about it. But this is something, as you get older, talk to your parents about it. If your parents have already passed, this is something you need to talk to your kids about. I read an article in the Funeral Director magazine about 10 years ago that said something like $100 million. They estimated $100 million in unclaimed life insurance policies that people just didn't know about. And this was like dating back for 10 years or whatever. But in 10 years, $100 million of unclaimed money. And the insurance company isn't going to call your kids and say, hey, did you know your dad had $50,000 of life insurance policy with us? They're just going to be like, oh, he's 180 years old. Let's just keep that money, So, let's see here. This is just kind of talks about who we are. On July 4th, 1955, Bud Linnemann and his wife Alice opened the Linnemann Funeral Homes in Erlanger. It's a really neat building if you've never been there. The building was built in 1902. Let's see here. It was Colonel Hub Buckner's residence, and we've done a lot of work to it. In 2010, they did a complete remodel. They put a couple $100,000 into it. It's got all marble floors. And then the facility I run out here in Burlington on Kentucky 18, we had a tragic fire in 2013, and I'm sure most of you remember. In 2014, we built a state-of-the-art funeral home. You can have about 200 guests in our main chapel. We also have an event center that seats about 75 people for a post-funeral reception. We've done some different meetings with organizations in northern Kentucky. If you're ever out and about and just want to check one of our facilities out, stop on by. At Christmas time, we do a really cool tree of remembrance, and we put tags of all the families we served from that year. So we have one at Erlanger and one at Burlington. The families are able to come get their picture taken in front of the tree, and then we send them home with a dove ornament on it to remind them of their loved one. So this is the end of my presentation. Does anybody have any questions? I know this is kind of a bridge. Usually this presentation is about 2 hours long, but when Julie asked me to speak, I kind of abridged it so I can make it in the time frame today. Any questions about funeral planning?
Do you see trends going more towards cremation than traditional burials?
100%. So when I started, I've been in the industry since 2008. We were at about 20% cremation when I started, so 80% burials, 20% cremation. It's about even now. And if you get further out west, California, they're about 80% cremation, 20% burials. So it's taken over. It's definitely more affordable. It's more convenient. Unfortunately, in the fast-paced society we live in today, people don't have the traditions like they used to. It's all about convenience now. So we always make fun at work. We work all week with nothing to do, and then Saturday comes and we have 5 funerals because my grandkid is off on Saturday, or people don't want to miss work and those things. Used to, someone died, 3 nights later you had a visitation. You took them to church for the service. We took them to the cemetery the following day. So that's kind of how it used to be. We don't get much of that anymore. It's a changing time.
So my mother passed about 7 years ago. My parents immigrated from Germany in 1952. And she was still getting a pension check from the German railroad every month. And when she passed, it stopped right away. And I don't believe she had any life insurance, but I mean, there must have been some system that notifies somebody when someone passes. Is there a system on that? That scares me about the life insurance part.
Social Security possibly notified them. I don't know, somebody. So there's a form called Report of a Death by a Funeral Director that we have to submit to the Social Security Administration. So it might have been, it might have been tied into that somehow. So when the funeral home notified them, maybe that notified them to stop that payment. But I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, that's probably what it was.
Yeah.
So, is there any, like with the death certificates, is there any sort of retention period that the funeral home has to maintain those before they get sent off to the state? Or if I went down some like ancestry project or whatever, that's a good source of information. There's a lot of stuff that you can find out about your relatives out there. And a lot of times you run into dead ends, but is there, if I'm talking someone who passed away in the 50s, would you still have record of that?
Yeah, we probably would if we served them. We have a whole attic at the Erlanger facility. I think it does go back to like 1943 on our records. And then I know they have a Covington facility that's called Serenity Funeral Care, but the Linnemann's owned and operated. They had some files from the early 1900s. It used to be Hugenberg Funeral Home on 6th Street back in the day. I think the state maybe goes back to the early 1900s. I don't know exactly what year they started filing death certificates in the state of Kentucky. But yeah, most funeral homes will go back almost to the beginning of their family. So, I mean, they started in 55 in Erlanger. I know we go at least to 55 in Erlanger with our files. So.
Josh, can you touch on how many death certificates you think a family needs?
Yeah,
and then the Social Security check that comes to the home, how that works after the person's deceased.
Thank you. Social Security does offer a death benefit of $255. You can only claim the death benefit if you have a surviving spouse or a child under the age of 18. So if you're a widow, you pass away and all of your kids are adult, no one can claim that death benefit of $255. You only get that if you have a surviving spouse or a child under the age of 18. The other question was about?
The other question was the number of suggested death certificates.
So you need a certified copy of a death certificate for any assets with your loved one's name still on them. House, car, property, life insurance, camper, motorcycle, anything that you're going to need to transfer that asset into someone else's name, you're going to need a certified copy. Now, if you do your planning and get everything taken care of before, you put a lot of that stuff in a trust, you'll need a lot less copies than you will if you don't have any preparations made. The average number of death certificates is probably 10. I've had families get as many as 25, and I've had families get as little as 1. So towards the end of life, I don't know if anyone here has ever dealt with Medicaid spend down. Towards the end of your life, if you end up in poor health, you end up in a nursing facility. Some of the local nursing homes are anywhere from about $8,000 to $12,000 a month. Seniors start to go through their money pretty quickly when that's the case. If you end up getting to the point where you're going to run out of money, the government doesn't let you just become an invalid. They actually, what you'll do is a Medicaid spin down. You'll liquidate all the assets you have left. You'll sell your house, your car. You'll do a Medicaid spin down and you end up in a Medicaid bed. If you ever are with a family or a family member in that situation where they're going to do a Medicaid spin down, first thing you need to do is get with an attorney. Second thing you need to do is get with your funeral home. You can put money during a Medicaid spin down into a funeral planning. You could plan your funeral. You could put money in that account. The government cannot touch that money. We can make it irrevocable. It'll be locked in. Even if you do it like right before they go on Medicaid. If you ever have a family member that's going to go on Medicaid, call your local funeral home. Get some money put away for their funeral. Okay.
Oh, I was just going to make a comment. I think there's a VA benefit too.
Yeah.
Kind of like a small fee.
Thank you for bringing that. If you're a veteran, we're very blessed here in Northern Kentucky. If you've never been down to Williamstown to see Kentucky Veterans North, it's one of the most beautiful cemeteries in the tri-state. If you are a veteran, you could be buried there for free. They pay for your plot, they pay for the opening and closing of the plot, and they provide a vault. If you are married to a veteran, you are a spouse of a veteran, you also could be buried there with your spouse. You pay a flat fee of $500. Wow. So it's a great resource for us. We do take a lot of veterans down there. If you've never been, go down there and check it out. It's right by the Ark. It's absolutely beautiful. All the headstones are perfect. They keep the grass perfect. The guys that take care of it are first class. It's really cool. So if you've never been there, go check that out. The best day to go would probably be Memorial Day. They got all the flags out. It's a nice time. But yeah, if you are a veteran, if you pass away in a veterans facility, there's some more benefits to you as well. They pay for the transport from the facility you died in to the funeral home. You're also eligible for a free grave marker, even if you're not buried in a veteran cemetery. So for instance, if you're buried out here at Burlington Cemetery, they will give you a stone. You'll probably purchase your own headstone. A lot of times husband and wife will share a headstone. And then if you served in the military, they'll give you a flat bronze marker. They'll put it at the foot. The marker itself is free. You do pay for somebody to put a foundation for them to put the marker on. Depending on what cemetery you go to, it will depend on cost, but I know like at Burlington Cemetery, I think it's $275. So cemeteries are another thing you want to look into as well. We have quite a few cemeteries here in Northern Kentucky. I won't bash any today, but some are definitely better than others. So you might want to stop if you're interested in being buried. Stop, check it out. Do they cut the grass? How much does it cost? Those are some things you want to keep up with. A lot of the smaller country cemeteries, such as Burlington, Dan McNeely is a good buddy of mine. He runs Burlington Cemetery. It's very affordable. He takes good care of it. Fort Mitchell, we got some Catholic cemeteries that are really nice. You got Highland Cemetery in Fort Mitchell. So there are a lot of nice cemeteries, but that's something you guys should definitely look into.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.